Here's the real scandal in Season 2. Not the cheating, but the producers quietly recycling the same fake gotcha text. Revisiting early Vanderpump Rules offers an unexpected reward. The discovery that even the show's most infamous scandal contains its own continuity errors, dutifully preserved like relics from a less technologically scrutinized era. In the Season 2 episode Bitch Slap, the audience is treated to the dramatic moment when Jax hands Sandoval his phone, inviting him to read a supposedly damning text exchange with Kristen. Sandoval obliges, sounding uncannily like a student delivering a book report written by a more literate classmate, and recites a message beginning with, "Jax, delete this text after you get this." One small complication, that very line had already been sent earlier in the season, by Stassi, impersonating Kristen, in an attempt to expose Jax. Word for word, punctuation for punctuation, a perfect match. And yet Sandoval, who witnessed the original stunt, reacts as though encountering the message for the first time. The likely explanation is the simplest one. The production needed a clean, unambiguous narrative. Reality television prefers crimes that are easy to diagram, not the kind that require an evidence wall and a ball of string. When a scandal already features two guilty parties and a tangle of secret communications, there's little appetite for additional nuance. Reusing the line allowed the show to present a tidy revelation, regardless of who actually typed it or when. It bears remembering that the series aired before the age of binge-watching, when viewers weren't pausing, rewinding, and cross-referencing timestamps. The expectation that anyone would catch a recycled text message was minimal. Episodes were designed for weekly consumption, not forensic review. There is, however, one delicious footnote. Kristen, already aware that her phone had become a community resource for undercover operations, sent Jax a warning. No further texts would be coming from her, and anything suspicious should be disregarded. A prudent move, though clearly not prudent enough to prevent the spectacle that followed. In the end, the most memorable moment of the scene isn't the recycled message or the narrative sleight of hand, but Sandoval's halting, remedial delivery of the text. An unexpected reminder that even amid scandal, some cast members are battling challenges more fundamental than deceit. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The loudest person in the room is often the one contributing the least. Sandoval enters Season 4 of Vanderpump Rules with all the subtlety of a malfunctioning fog machine, constantly erupting, endlessly dramatic, and inexplicably convinced of his own moral authority. He hurls judgments at everyone in sight, insisting his proclamations be treated as universal truth. Yet the moment anyone dares to offer even a whisper of critique, particularly if it concerns him or Ariana, he detonates. Dialogue is abandoned in favor of theatrical overreaction, complete with a rapid-fire recitation of everyone else's supposed shortcomings. What makes this behavior especially grating is its consistency. The pattern is almost impressive in its reliability, a man who demands grace while dispensing none. Season 4 merely sets the stage. It only hints at the dizzying heights his self-righteousness will eventually achieve. Even the evolution of his hair, long, longer, then inexplicably frosted, functions as a kind of visual metaphor for his escalating flair for spectacle. His brief foray into a music career, punctuated by that unforgettable performance at Katie's engagement party, adds another layer of unintended comedy. Season 5 only intensifies the effect. The jealousy simmering beneath his polished exterior becomes impossible to miss, particularly whenever Schwartz receives attention he believes should rightfully orbit him. It's a masterclass in flashy insecurity. And, of course, there is the voice, that strained high-pressure screech he deploys whenever he ascends his imaginary moral high ground. Each outburst lands with the jarring immediacy of a jump scare, as if the viewer has been ambushed by an indignant goblin demanding respect. Across the early seasons, Sandoval crafts a persona that is part self-appointed judge, part wounded martyr, and entirely exhausting. Anyone encountering him for the first time is quickly initiated into the unique frustration of watching a man who insists on being right, even when merely loud. Never expect self-awareness from a man who tried to propose during someone else's engagement party. Brock enters the screen with the unmistakable confidence of a man convinced he is the main event, even when standing in the middle of someone else's celebration. Attempting to stage a marriage proposal during another couple's engagement party isn't merely tone-deaf, it's a masterclass in attention-seeking. The move encapsulates the larger pattern, an almost athletic lack of self-awareness paired with an unshakable belief that spotlight theft is a charming personality trait. His resume off-camera is no more impressive. A trail of abandoned children, a documented history of domestic violence, and a steadfast refusal to maintain stable employment form the foundation of his personal mythology. The cheating scandals, past and present, would be predictable if they weren't so exhaustively recycled. Even Sheena, eager for companionship and a child before the clock struck 40, managed to overlook all of this, insisting on marrying a man whose red flags could be seen from space. In the process, she saddled herself with both a newborn and a fully grown dependent in need of perpetual supervision. Their union reaches comedic heights in its unfortunate symmetry, naming a child Summer. When a stepchild named Winter already exists is the kind of theatrical misstep that would feel too on the nose in a scripted drama. Yet here, it simply reinforces the shared disregard the pair has for the people left in the wake of their choices. Meanwhile, the network continues to extend invitations to events and shows as though domestic violence allegations and a catalog of personal failures are mere footnotes. Others have been exiled for similar offenses, yet Brock is repeatedly offered airtime and even granted the indignity of dispensing relationship advice, despite simultaneously concealing an affair during Shiana's pregnancy. The self-proclaimed international fitness investor and carpenter influencer presents himself as a man of many trades, though none appear to involve consistent work or meaningful parental commitment. What does remain consistent is the suspicion that childcare functions primarily as logistical cover for his extracurricular pursuits. His charisma hovers at absolute zero, yet he compensates with a steady stream of mansplaining and misogynistic posturing that somehow manages to outshine the worst habits of his contemporaries. In the end, the portrait is unmistakable: an opportunist, a mooch, a performative partner, a man willing to exploit any platform and any person to secure relevance. The list of grievances, abandonment, infidelity, violence, manipulation, reads less like a character critique and more like an exhaustive indictment. If anything has been overlooked, it's only because the catalog is already too long to hold comfortably in memory. And yet, in a twist worthy of reality television's most ironic scripts, he and Shiana remain perfectly matched, two people so committed to spectacle that the chaos becomes their closest approximation of compatibility. Here's the uncomfortable truth about Katie's situation. Believing you're the exception only works until you aren't. Katie's social media feed, once a weekly shrine to her relationship, has recently gone conspicuously quiet. The absence of her boyfriend from the grid has already sparked murmurs, though he continues to make dutiful cameo appearances in holiday family footage, proof, apparently, that the relationship still has a pulse. The more intriguing question is not whether the man is present, but why anyone is celebrating his presence at all. His reputation for chronic infidelity is well documented, and no amount of pastel hair dye can soften the impression. Longevity, in this case, offers no reassurance. A year-long relationship with a problematic partner does not magically render him less problematic. What remains most striking is the insistence on viewing this union through a romantic haze thick enough to obscure every glaring red flag. Confidence in being the exception to a serial cheater's pattern is a classic delusion, one that tends to dissolve only when the inevitable betrayal arrives on schedule. When it does, the ensuing lament will be as predictable as the warnings she has already chosen to ignore. The unfortunate truth is simple. She could do immeasurably better than the pink-haired chaos currently occupying the boyfriend role. The bar, at this point, is subterranean. Everyone claims they're too sophisticated for Vanderpump Rules, until they accidentally watch 5 minutes. Here's the inconvenient truth. The quest to convert an unwilling partner into a Vanderpump Rules loyalist has become something of a domestic sport. The show is, after all, a masterpiece of chaotic anthropology, an operatic collision of delusion, self-absorption, and very small dogs in impractically large handbags. Yet some individuals, particularly those with steely professions and a certain black cat by the sea aura, remain curiously resistant to its charms. Fortunately, the recruitment strategies are well established. The classic method is simple: play the show in the background. No pressure, no explanation, just the irresistible gravitational pull of televised narcissism doing its work. Even the most stubborn viewers eventually wander in with a suspiciously casual, "Can you believe this guy?" as if they have not, in fact, been watching over your shoulder for 20 straight minutes. More advanced techniques involve environmental manipulation. A full bottle of rosé, a long, draining day, and perhaps a simmering irritation with colleagues create the ideal psychological conditions. Add the slightest hint of relevance to a personal interest, any tenuous social connection, a shared profession, a hobby mentioned once in 2019, and suddenly the show becomes surprisingly relatable. For those requiring a more dramatic entry point, timing is everything. Begin several episodes before the notorious slap. Provide just enough context for the emotional tectonics to make sense, ensuring the viewer is primed for maximum impact. This approach has been known to transition even the most adamant skeptics into fully vocal commentators by season 5. There is also the nuclear option. Casually drop a line like, "I can't believe Zanderville invited Raquel over while Ariana was away." Fake bewilderment helps. No one likes being left out of a cultural scandal they don't yet understand. Ultimately, however, the most honest tactic remains the simplest. Request a single episode, an indulgence, a gesture of affection, a diplomatic exchange. If Vanderpump Rules cannot win a convert with one well-chosen installment, then even the finest background noise campaigns, scandal teases, and rosé-fueled ambushes may not succeed. Some hearts, regrettably, remain immune to greatness. Here's the uncomfortable truth about Ariana's friendships. They weren't built on chemistry, they were built on contrarianism. There is a certain wistful optimism in imagining Stassi, Katie, Kristen, and Ariana functioning as a cohesive unit, a fantasy ensemble of sharp tongues, sharper grievances, and enough latent chaos to power several seasons without a single producer note. The idea of these four operating in harmony is compelling precisely because it is so spectacularly improbable. Even before one of them re-enters the narrative orbit, the hope persists that they might one day manage to coexist without combusting. Ariana and Kristen, for instance, could have been an unexpectedly electric pair had their infamous summit not occurred. There was potential for a dynamic rooted in volatile chemistry rather than mutual suspicion. The same hypothetical applies to Ariana and Stassi, though it remains largely theoretical. Their interactions are scarce, their friction oddly disproportionate, and Ariana's inexplicable irritation towards Stassi appears to materialize from thin air. Observers often attempt to reduce this tension to some contrarian instinct, a tendency to latch onto the underdog as a way of announcing superiority to the social hierarchy. The cool girl by opposition posture certainly presents itself as a convenient explanation. Yet it is equally true that Ariana's closest ally was Shiana, and Stassi, for all her charisma, frequently embraced the role of resident tormentor. Under such conditions, friction was inevitable, not arbitrary. Still, the long-anticipated reunion of Stassi, Katie, and Kristen, the iconic self-anointed coven, retains its mythical status. Their eventual convergence promises a familiar blend of loyalty, theatrics, and delightfully coordinated disdain. The only lingering hope is that, somewhere along the way, the full quartet might share at least a fleeting moment of unity before divergent loyalties resume their usual territorial war. Amid all this interpersonal calculus, two constants emerge: the exasperation directed at Schwartz and the enduring irritation caused by James Kennedy. No amount of cast evolution, emotional growth, or shifting alliances seems capable of softening that judgment. The broader arc offers another revelation. Season 8, despite its reputation, stands as a strangely satisfying sweet spot for the original ensemble. It captures the cast at a pivotal moment, still messy enough to be entertaining, not yet flattened by self-awareness, and provides a rare snapshot of the group before the fault lines deepen beyond repair. Ariana's trajectory, viewed in sequence, reveals moderate but genuine development, complicated by the dead weight of an underperforming partner. Yet, the early persona, equal parts aloof and performatively above the fray, remains unmistakable. The pick-me affectation never entirely evaporates, even as maturity gradually overtakes the posture. As for the phrase, revisionist history, it refers to the convenient rewriting of past events to suit present arguments, a practice that, fittingly, thrives in both academic circles and reality television fandom. And in the world of Vanderpump alliances, nothing is revised more frequently than the memory of who wronged whom and why. Here, as always, the truth is neither simple nor symmetrical. It is merely entertaining, often in spite of the participants, occasionally because of them, and perpetually due to the irresistible chaos they generate together and apart. Here's the part of Ariana's Season 11 behavior the fanbase refuses to talk about. Ariana Madix's Season 11 saga has been framed as a story of righteous boundaries, but the execution often looked less like emotional self-preservation and more like indiscriminate scorched earth. Yes, the betrayal she endured was spectacular in scale. Few could fault her for refusing further contact with the man who detonated her life on national television. But the ripple effect, the expectation that decades-long friendships evaporate on command, revealed a far more complicated dynamic than the triumphant narrative suggests. The swift dismissal of anyone who maintained even a basic rapport with her ex wasn't merely boundary setting. It played as avoidance dressed up in therapeutic language, demanding that friends obliterate their own history with someone they've known for 10 or 20 years is less about protecting peace and more about insisting that other people's emotional lives orbit around a single catastrophe. Worse, it conveyed the impression that those friendships were only valued when they served her. Despite her own history of maintaining ties, others might have reasonably questioned. Season 11 made it clear that no one in the group knew how to navigate the fallout. The atmosphere was fractured beyond repair, and emotional rationality was in short supply across the board. Ariana was grieving, furious, blindsided, and understandably unsteady, and people in that state rarely make immaculate decisions. The problem isn't that she faltered. The problem is the insistence that every reaction was somehow unassailable. Her choices worked out for her publicly, but that doesn't make them beyond critique privately. And then there's the matter of selective grace. Consider the continued friendship with Shiana, someone who at various points aligned herself with Lala and even Sandoval, aired frustrations about Ariana behind her back, and withheld information about her own relationship crisis. If unwavering loyalty were the standard, that connection should have dissolved on contact. Instead, it endured. Meanwhile, figures like Schwartz, whom she declared herself done with, received more interaction than her absolutist rhetoric would suggest. The criteria for acceptable proximity to Sandoval seemed to shift depending on circumstance, convenience, or perhaps simply the emotional weather of the day. None of this makes Ariana a villain. It makes her human, reactive, imperfect, grieving, and often overwhelmed. But the messy reality doesn't negate the obvious. She could have handled the friendship fallout with more nuance, just as nearly everyone else in that cast could have handled something better. Expecting flawless navigation amid chaos is unrealistic. Pretending that every misstep was a masterclass in boundary setting is equally so. Here's what no one seems willing to admit about Sandoval's so-called generosity. Tom Sandoval's decision to bankroll James Kennedy's grand proposal to Raquel remains one of reality television's more baffling gestures, until, of course, one remembers the endlessly reliable logic of a narcissist. Few things delight a self-styled hero more than orchestrating someone else's big moment, provided it ultimately spotlights the magnanimous puppeteer behind the curtain. The gesture was not merely generous, it was performed with the flourish of a man auditioning for Best Friend of the Year, while simultaneously conducting a covert affair. Nothing strengthens a public alibi quite like a lavish display of loyalty. After all, who would believe whispers of an illicit relationship when the accused benefactor is literally funding the woman's engagement celebration? It's the kind of carefully curated contradiction narcissists adore. Public benevolence weaponized as a character shield. Sandoval has long been enamored with the idea of being the indispensable centerpiece of his social circle. The checkbook, conveniently, functions as his scepter. Supporting people financially allows him to keep them orbiting around his ego, grateful and dependent. And if he happened to already be circling Raquel romantically, the elaborate proposal conveniently doubled as an extended peacock display, proof of what he could offer her, even under the guise of helping her commit to someone else. This wasn't the first time he attempted to turn a milestone event into a personal showcase. His determination to wedge himself into Jax's wedding, preferably near the best man position, offered a preview of the same impulse. Every moment must pivot back to him, even if the actual participants resist the rearrangement. His penchant for planning is well documented, and he thrives when he can cast himself as the benevolent architect of group joy. The desert-themed spectacle served the entire friend group, allowing them to cosplay a music festival during a pandemic, and positioned him as the fun-loving facilitator. It also conveniently allowed him to manage his emerging dalliance with Raquel from every angle, bonding with her through the planning, performing concern for James, and polishing a long-term image of selfless innocence. Whether guilt played any role is debatable. If it did, it was likely the faint, fleeting variety that evaporates under stage lights. Sandoval later told Andy Cohen that he spent the planning phase in emotional tears and, in the same breath, cited the financial perks of filming the event for television. It was, he explained, a tax write-off, a remark he swiftly attempted to backpedal, though not convincingly. Adding to the spectacle, much of the proposal's production was reportedly donated, leaving Sandoval primarily responsible for the fireworks, an appropriate metaphor for a man who prefers grand, explosive gestures over sincerity. And finally, the strategic benefit cannot be ignored. Elevating Raquel's visibility, polishing her image, and positioning her as the ascendant #1 girl just in time for a future coupling, the blueprint was unmistakable. Whether orchestrated consciously or simply born of instinctual ego, the pattern was clear. Elevate her, distance himself from Ariana, and usher Raquel into a pre-selected role with maximum dramatic payoff. In short, the proposal was less an act of generosity than an investment in narrative control, part romance, part misdirection, and entirely on brand. Here's what no one wants to admit about the Sandoval legal saga. The courtroom drama isn't delayed. It's barely alive. In the grand tradition of the California court system, the legal disputes orbiting Tom Sandoval, Raquel, Rachel Leviss, and Ariana Madix continue to move at a pace best described as glacial with commitment issues. At this rate, the cases may outlive public memory of the people involved, an impressive feat given how quickly pop culture attention sheds its old obsessions in favor of the next shiny show. Despite earlier reports insisting that a courtroom showdown was slated for November 3, 2025, legal analysts now point out that no such hearing will occur. The trial date once appeared on the docket, but the entire matter has since drifted into limbo due to Ariana Madix's appeal. A judge had previously dismissed part of the claim against her, and Leviss's legal team promptly appealed that decision, thereby slamming the brakes on forward movement. The housing dispute, arguably the most mundane subplot of this melodrama, is expected to crawl toward either mediation or trial early next year. Meanwhile, the taping incident case has slipped into an indefinite holding pattern. The Los Angeles County judge continues to set trial dates as a formality, though the ongoing appeal effectively renders those dates decorative. Actual authority rests with the appellate court, and until it speaks, the entire matter is frozen. By July, the situation had achieved full bureaucratic suspension. With Ariana's anti-SLAPP ruling under review, practically every related case, including the claims against Sandoval, sits paused. A status conference and trial setting conference have been penciled in for April 26, at which point the judge will decide whether anything is even ready to proceed. Complicating matters further is attorney Brian Friedman, who represents both Levice and Faith. Friedman appears to have spent the year preoccupied with defending Justin Baldoni, whose own high-profile trial is scheduled for March 2026. His availability for appellate work on Levice's behalf seems aspirational. Why no new counsel has been retained remains an open question, though the logistical clash is obvious. The sum total, multiple cases stalled. One attorney stretched thin, an appellate court silently holding the keys, and a timeline so distant it practically qualifies as science fiction. By the time rulings finally emerge, the cultural spotlight will almost certainly have swiveled elsewhere. But should Sandoval ever appear on the Valley, at least viewers may get the small consolation of watching him ceremoniously relocate his infamous penis flute and ride off with Vicky in a sidecar, perhaps the only swift exit in this entire saga. Here's the part of Shiana Shea's singing career no one wants to admit, because it's far more fascinating than the performances themselves. Shiana Shea's musical ambitions remain one of reality television's most mystifying artifacts. Season 8 once again resurrects the spectacle, complete with a pride performance of Good as Gold. So unintentionally comedic, it borders on performance art. The immediate question is not why she did it. This is Vanderpump Rules, after all. But who in the chain of command permitted it? Somewhere along the way, someone with a straight face assured her she possessed vocal talent. A bold claim, presumably delivered by Tom Sandoval, a man never shy about comparing others' abilities to his own, however inflated those may be. Even within a cast famous for its delusion-per-minute ratio, Sheena distinguishes herself with astonishingly low self-awareness. It's almost admirable. Academics could build entire case studies on her artistic confidence. Defenders insist that pride crowds at SUR actively want to hear Shiana perform Good as Gold, as though throngs gather not for the event itself, but for the privilege of witnessing a reality personality lip-sync her personal anthem. This theory assumes the audience is motivated by loyalty rather than morbid curiosity. A generous interpretation. Her performance history offers little evidence of improvement. Revisit her early-stage debut in Season 1, where an agent gently suggested choreography to prevent her from looking stranded on stage. This inspired exactly one half-hearted dance lesson, accompanied by claims of extensive training that, by her own admission, occurred somewhere between group snacks and elementary school recess. Predictably, the final product involved her rotating her hips in existential confusion, while backup dancers attempted to recall their lyrics. A brief, semi-coordinated flourish at the end served less as choreography and more as a mercy killing. The saga only deepens with her attempt to join a boy band. Not only was she never invited, she requested entry on camera, an ambush proposal no one could politely decline without looking monstrous. The resulting arrangement radiated second-hand embarrassment and contractual obligation. The delusion, at times, reaches Jenna Maroney levels, a parallel that feels less like snark and more like biography. Season 11 even teased a musical reunion with said band, a collaboration that appears to have evaporated entirely. One can only speculate whether they quietly fled the arrangement or simply changed their contact information. In the grand tradition of Shiana Shea's musical career, the silence has been deafening, and, in this case, merciful. What they don't tell you about Tom Tom is that the Toms didn't get chosen, they got purchased. The supposed question, why anyone would select Tom Schwartz as a business partner, assumes that a genuine partnership ever existed. It didn't. Not in intention, not in practice, and certainly not in competence. Schwartz, after all, is the man who famously melted down during his first bartending shift and exited after 10 minutes, leaving behind a legacy of commitment issues, half-hearted career attempts, and a professional passion roughly equivalent to a damp cocktail napkin. No steady work history, no business acumen, no discernible enthusiasm. Precisely the resume every serious investor dreams of. Naturally, Lisa had no interest in depending on him for anything that involved actual work. What she did want, however, was his name. The Toms, at the height of the show's popularity, were less entrepreneurs and more beloved mascots, public-facing accessories whose main function was to charm fans and generate storyline fodder. They were the stable couples, the friendly faces, the guaranteed attention magnets. Viewers adored them so intensely that even mild criticism triggered mass outrage. For a seasoned restaurateur with a flair for showmanship, the opportunity was irresistible. The brilliance lies in the reversal of roles. Lisa did not bring the Toms into her business. The Toms paid Lisa for the privilege of appearing as though the Say were part of it. They bought a sliver of ownership, an exceptionally tiny sliver, while she retained full control, all the profits, and none of the burdens associated with their involvement. Meetings with them were depicted less as collaboration and more as an exercise in tolerating enthusiastic distractions. They were not partners, they were props with equity. Even the name Tom Tom, which some find questionable, served its purpose. It was catchy, marketable, and conveniently aligned with the duo's existing popularity. Add in the fact that Tom Tom is also a type of drum, an unrelated but amusing coincidence, and the branding practically wrote itself. From a business standpoint, the arrangement was a coup. Vanderpump Rules was operating at full cultural saturation, ensuring endless free promotion, steady fan traffic, and the illusion of shared creative vision without the inconvenience of actually sharing anything. The Toms' ongoing appearances, flirtations, and willingness to perpetually orbit around the Vanderpump brand only sweetened the deal. They continued to promote the establishment without requiring authority, input, or even basic decision-making power. The final twist? Some argue the Toms still profit respectably from their minuscule investment, and they might. But the real victory belongs to Lisa, who managed to monetize their appeal, leverage their fame, and retain absolute control, all while maintaining the aura of benevolence. It was never about partnering with Schwartz. It was about harnessing the spectacle of Schwartz and Sandoval at their peak and giving an empire a fresh coat of storyline-friendly gloss. A shrewd decision, a profitable illusion, and a reminder that in the world of reality television, business partnerships don't need to function. They only need to sparkle.